Before I introduce my esteemed panelist, I will just give us a short brief about this topic and why we are discussing this topic. And hardly it is discussed in conferences. So over the past century, there has been a movement to integrate women into various fields, especially in STEM, even in economics and in finance, and also in pure sciences. And when I was thinking, and the female participation is low across all these disciplines. But some of my friends asked me that because the women participation is low, so why you are considering only economics? So my reply was because economics is about public policy. And when we talk about public policy, it's not only men. It's about the household, and household have women and then children and elderly. So, but the policy, those who are making the policy are only men. So on the behalf of the women and children and the elderly, only men are making the policy. So it affects all the household. So that's why the inclusivity in terms of gender is very important, and even otherwise, it's very important for economics especially. Before I come to my panelists and introduce them, so one of the facts that I realized that there is only one woman on the board of Reserve Bank of India, only one woman on the board of the Bangladesh Bank, and there is no woman at all on the board of State Bank of Pakistan. So this is the state of, this is how we can realize the level of excluding women from policy making. And now coming toward the academia, recently I analyzed the RAPEC and RAPEC ideas data set, and I analyzed the top 25% of the top institution, top economics department in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. And my realization was that when I looked into the statistics, in Pakistan, out of 22 economics department, only 5 were headed by women. And in India, this was among 63 top economics department, only 10 were headed by women, and in Bangladesh, it was 3 out of 15. So it's not only that who is heading the department, even within those economics department, the ratio between men and women faculty members was very imbalanced. So that's why, and before I come to my panelists, another fact that is very important to mention here is that, as I said, that women participation is low across all disciplines, but the good news in rest of the discipline is the trends are upward. For instance, in mathematics and in STEM disciplines, the trend is upward, so this is a good news. But in economics, trend is stagnant. And this is something, so here is a complex thing, and this is the question that I am trying to understand, why is that? And we will try to explore this in this session. So now I will introduce my panelists. First of all, we have Dr. Ratna Sahe. She has a 33-year of career at IMF, and she is right now a professor at National Council of Applied Economic Research, New Delhi. And she is also honorary fellow at the Center for Development, Global Development in DC, and also member of the working group of G20 and World Economic Forum. So thank you. She is joining us from Washington. Thank you very much, Ratna, for joining us today. Then we have Dr. Alia H. Khan. She is former Dean and Chair of Department of Economics, Qaid-e-Azam University. She is working with various government advisory boards and in different capacities. And she is also my teacher when I was studying at Qaid-e-Azam University. So this is an honor for me that she joined this panel today. And then we have Hadia Majid. Hadia is Chair of Department of Economics at Lahore University of Management Sciences. She is currently involved in role of AI, and she is trying to study that how AI is changing the behavior or gender norm in the marketplaces and also otherwise. Finally, we have Sundar Silimi, a brilliant economist, and she is a senior research fellow at Center for Development Research, University of Bonn, Germany. These days, she is working on gender, migration, and mobility. So thank you all my panelists for joining us today. So I will start from Ratna. So Ratna, you have spent significant time at World Bank, and you were leading the role of gender and inclusion of women in policy making. And now, because of your involvement at National Council of Applied Economic Research, so both are very much into policy. So what is your take on why it is important to take women in policy, and how you see the difference in practices in the developed world and in the South Asia region?
So thank you very much, Asma. It's a real pleasure for me to participate with all of you. We have such common issues that we deal in our respective countries. Having worked at the IMF for so long and having interacted with so many policymakers, especially finance ministers and central bank governors, and of course the board of the IMF, which has always been all men, and even the staff when I joined the IMF, there were only a handful of us female economists, so it was a very lonely place at that point in time. So I definitely have seen a lot. And to some of your questions, I have prepared, just 5 slides, and I thought I would just talk you through because it shows how the IMF itself, being so traditional, so male-dominated, has changed only very recently. I had the privilege, actually, I'm a macroeconomist, also worked on finance for overwhelming part of my career, and only in the last few years I had started looking at the issue of gender in macroeconomics, and the managing director invited me into her office. Actually, it was a real privilege to design the IMF's first gender mainstreaming strategy for our 190 member countries. So I want to show you a little bit about that as to what is the change that has happened and why. But you're absolutely right on the fact that there are very few women in economics, and especially in policy making. So if your colleagues could kindly just put up my slide, and then I'll just talk you through those 5 slides. Thank you. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And
I think you need to go to the next slide.
yeah, I think it's frozen, maybe. Okay. Okay, so we skipped actually one of the slides, but that's okay. So let me just tell you what the facts are. So the facts are that, of more than, 190, maybe 192 countries in the world, there are only 31 heads of state, 36 finance ministers, and 22 central bank governors. So you can see how imbalanced the gender ratio is. And then if you look at ministers and national parliamentarians, less than 25% are ministers and parliamentarians. A third fact is when you look at the private sector, the financial sector, the women account for less than 5% of CEOs in banks and less than 20% of executive board members, not only in banks but supervisory agencies, which are also very important. And that's based on some work I did myself. And then I did some more work, and the fourth fact is that we looked at fintech firms, and we saw that only 10 to 15% of fintech firms are started by women, and less than 10% are on executive boards. So these are very imbalanced numbers. And then when you look at not just the leadership positions, but just women working in the financial sector, there are quite a few women who are working in the financial sector now. It's about 50%. This is all global. But only 15% become managers. And that's a major issue that really needs not just research, but policy action. And finally, there are only 15% of senior investment teams of private equity and venture capital funds which are gender balanced. So let's go to the next slide. So then the question is, okay, so you have all these imbalanced gender panels, gender boards, few women, and what is the cost? What is the cost to the country, to the economy, to this society, if you don't have enough women leaders? And again, based on a lot of studies, and 3 of these I've done myself, the first one that I want to highlight is, and that research is still ongoing, we are already finding that when the share of female ministers and national parliamentarians are higher in countries, and this is a cross-country study, there is a positive relationship between more female leaders and higher education and health spending, which is absolutely critical, not just for girls, but also boys. A second, we also found that if there are more balanced boards, gender balanced boards, then in both not just banks, but also supervisory agencies, we found that the financial performance is better in that non-performing loans, for example, are much lower with the presence of women. Then looking at the fintech firms, what we found is that if there are boards are more balanced, there are more women on the boards, they actually generate 13% higher revenues. Yet we find that women have a very hard time starting up fintech firms compared to men. So that points to clear bias. And then the IFC had done a study and found that the more gender balanced senior investment teams of both private equity and venture capital funds, they also generated 10 to 20% higher returns. And finally, if you look at the corporate sector, not just the financial sector, the private corporate sector, all sectors combined, there's a study which shows that there is, again, a positive association between profitability and the share of women in senior positions. So the evidence on the presence of women in policy-making roles is so overwhelming positive, and yet there are so few. So let me tell you what brought about the change, at least at the IMF. So if you could turn to the next slide. So why is IMF now decided to mainstream gender in its own work across surveillance, across lending, across technical assistance, capacity building with its 190 member countries? So the first is really, gender gaps are many and large, and there's a clear realization with the IMF's mandate to increase economic growth, ensure financial stability. How can you ignore 50% or more of the world's population? A recent World Economic Forum gender gaps report, global gender gaps report, actually finds, which is shocking, that it will take 131 years to close the gender gaps across the world at current policies. I mean, that's really discouraging. And actually this number, this 100 years, was lower before COVID hit. Before COVID hit, it was only going to take 100 years. Now it's 130 years. So people can't ignore, including policymakers. And the second reason is, what the IMF calls gender gaps are macro-critical. What is macro-critical? Let me tell you in very simple words. All it means is that if you close gender gaps, there are huge positive returns to the society as a whole, to the economy as a whole, in terms of higher growth, greater financial stability, lower inequality. So as long as the IMF is able to then incorporate this in its own work because it has macro implications. So a lot of work has been done at the IMF, and I'm continuing to do that at the National Council of Applied Economic Research, but more in relation to India, to establish the loss to everybody by not addressing gender gaps. And then the question is, why now? Because there are also very interesting interrelationships between gender and climate change, for example. I was so shocked to read in one of the UN reports that of those displaced due to climate change, 80% are women. And where are the women in making policies on climate adaptation or mitigation? A second aspect that also people are realizing that there's much greater global fragility and conflicts around the world, and when you have more women in task forces to bring about peace, peace comes much faster. So that's another realization. A third factor is digitalization. What we have found is that, again, in one of my own studies, is that the digital gap across countries has been closing over time, but not across genders. In fact, in some regions, specifically, our own and a couple others, our own meaning in South Asia, the gender gap is actually widening when it comes to the digital gap. And then, of course, COVID really laid to bear how women were so disproportionately impacted by COVID, and that is very hard to ignore. But finally, let me say the real reason, in some sense, that really gave it a push was that last two heads of the IMF were women. So you had Christine Lagarde, who actually told us to start the work. So that's how some of us started to do this work, but basically on our overtime or on weekends, looking at gender. And then, of course, when Christina became the head, 2-3 years ago, she was very adamant that people or staff should not be working on the side; it should become mainstream in the IMF. So that was the reason. And then let's go to the next slide, and I'll show you a framework of thinking about how one should be integrating gender in establishing macro-criticality. And the way we approach the issue, and I am still approaching it, is by starting with the main drivers of gender disparities, and that is at the bottom of the chart. So what are the main drivers? They are unequal access to education, to health, to real assets, land, infrastructure, unequal legal rights, violence against women, unpaid care, and of course, very true in our region, which is cultural and social barriers. So all these are the main drivers of gender disparity, and they then lead to unequal opportunities and outcomes, whether they are in female labor force participation, in productivity, in wages, financial access, leadership, and then they, of course, impact the macro, which is it leads to lower economic growth, greater financial instability, and higher income inequality. So the case, the real case that, at least the IMF would like to approach, and which is what I'm doing, is to argue the case for closing the gender gap by making an economic case, by making a business case. Of course, it is a humanitarian case, and it's a human right actually. But what we found is that unfortunately, the policymakers and big business can only get convinced fully and integrate it in their own core work when they see it as benefiting the whole economy. And let me conclude with a final slide. And so the basic conclusion is that I would like you to remember is that gender gaps in leadership positions are large, and they are large everywhere actually if you look around the world. And to your question, Asma, what is the difference between advanced economies and the emerging markets or the developing countries? There are some differences, but there are many commonalities. So for example, if you look at legal rights, many countries, including developing economies, and even in India, where I come from, the rights are there, but they are not enforced. They are not enforced. I mean, from my own example of my mother, when it came to inheritance, it was given to her brothers. And so I asked her, why didn't you ask? She said, am I going to choose my brother, fighting with my brother, or, do I care about the land? And that is a very typical attitude. And that continues till today. So the difference really is, if you ask me, and if you push me to, say, what is the one thing you would say is so different between advanced economies and our countries, I would say it's the cultural and social barriers, which are one of the most rigid and difficult to shift. But there are studies that are also showing that if top leadership believes in changing those barriers, breaking down those barriers, and as you've seen in Saudi Arabia, it's happening. Female labor force participation has gone up from 22% to 35%. It was a goal they wanted to reach by 2030. They've already reached it. So it can happen. And the second point is, there are many economic benefits of female leaders and balanced boards, as I just showed you. So there's no reason, at least from a business and economic perspective, why gender gaps should not be closed. And therefore, I would argue that apart from the human rights issue, I think we should raise.
Ratna, I will, if you quickly finish this, so I will back to you in second round.
Sure.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. So I was just completing the last sentence. What I would say is that raising awareness of the economic benefits is really important. Thank you, Asma.
Yeah, thank you, Ratna, for setting the stage and sharing the empirical evidence and some of the very important statistics. So now I will come to Dr. Alia. So Dr. Alia spent a significant time in academia. So Dr. Alia, my question from you is, how do you see the transition from undergrad to grad school, especially from the female students in economics department, and then joining the labor market and then coming to the leadership position? So how do you see the pipelines and networks and sponsorship? What is your comment on that?
Okay, thank you, first of all, Dr. Asma, for inviting me to this very, very important panel. I think it is long overdue, and I'm very hopeful that after this panel we will have some kind of a platform, maybe just a digital platform, to address some of the issues that I want to raise about women in academia and the economics profession. And I could talk about women in policy making, economic policy making as well, but because of paucity of time, I would not really delve into that. And this is a setting where many of the women sitting in the audience are, trying to shape their careers in the economics profession. So first of all, there are some like recorded statistics about the position of women in the field of economics. And when I started researching this topic, I came to know that the American Economic Association actually has a special committee on the status of women in the economics profession. It's a standing committee, and every year they stock take and monitor the position of women in the economics profession, and from there they infer certain truths or certain facts. And one very stark fact is that all the way from the PhD enrollment of women to becoming full professor, women remain a minority as compared to men. It is a very, very difficult journey, especially in the field of economics. And though some student yesterday raised the question of, you know, why we allude to our personal journeys, I think it is important to allude to them. And the fact about Quaid-e-Azam University is that in about 65 years of its existence, I am the only female who was promoted to associate professor and then to full professor. That says a lot about the state of women in the economics profession at a premier public sector university. And let me now focus on why women, as you said, and as is referred to, leak out of the career pipeline in economics. I would say that they not only leak out, they are choked almost to death in the pipeline of the economics profession. And why? Because you all know that to head an economics department or any other department, you need to be promoted to associate professor. So the hardest journey is from assistant professor to associate professor, and it was a hard journey for me as well. But the fact is that there is really no mentoring of how to move up the pipeline. Men or male economists have their networks in which there is basically informal mentoring, but since the ratio of senior female economists is so low, and the other fact is that they do not have any network in which the senior faculty who have managed to overcome these hurdles and obstacles can mentor the younger female economists on how to shape their profile so that they can make this critical jump from assistant professorship to associate professorship, and then obviously from associate to full professor. I mean, by the time they are promoted to associate professor positions, they are very close to retirement, which is, especially in public sector universities, the retirement age is 60. And if they don't have enough time to serve as a full professor, then obviously they will never reach the leadership positions like, you know, being the faculty dean. I was fortunate enough to be promoted at a time when I had you know, enough years that I could serve the term for a dean faculty of social sciences, but it's not that easy. And what is a universal truth, and especially after COVID, what has you know, been established is that since women have to act in both the productive and the reproductive spheres, they do need some kind of support, career support mechanisms to balance their family and work responsibilities. And now this is no longer a topic which people evade. I mean, this year's Nobel Prize went to Claudia Golden for establishing the fact that, you know, how this difficult process of balancing family and career does not lead to the potential that women have in them to participate in the labor force and to reach senior positions. And the other thing is that while they are making this journey from assistant professor to associate professor, and since I have, mentored young female faculty, each time, there is an opportunity for being nominated to attend a conference or a training program, or much less, an overseas conference and training program, women simply do not have the credentials due to lack of engagement with the world of economics outside the university classrooms and computer labs, that they would even be considered to represent the university at such forums. And inevitably, the people who nominate are male, the ones who get nominated are males, and it's sometimes very, tragic that male would be representing the university at a forum where the topic is really related to gender gaps, and a female would have really spoken from the heart and come about, with very concrete recommendations, but she just is choked in that pipeline, cannot move ahead. So how do we unclog those choked pipelines? I think it's less a problem of leakage in Pakistan, especially in the public sector universities, because before the tenure track was introduced, the basic pay scale system was such that, you could even retire, and many women have retired as just assistant professors. You just keep on doing what you were doing for 30 years, and then you retire and you at least get a pension, but not really much recognition in the field of economics. And that is why when I sit on selection boards, I notice that women, wherever there is an option, they would not opt for a tenure track position. They would rather go for a basic pay scale position, because they know at the end of the day that they will not be able to pass the midterm probationary review or the tenure review at the end of their track period. But that shouldn't be like this. So what I'm proposing is that we should really look into a platform where the position of women in economics is monitored on a yearly basis in all universities of Pakistan. Even in women universities, all women universities, in the economics department, it is extremely hard to be promoted from assistant to associate, and then from associate to full professor. I mean, the day when my first PhD graduate was promoted to full professor at the Fatma Jinnah Women University was a very special day for me, because I knew what kind of difficult journey she had to go through, even being at a women's university, because it is really a myth that women leaders are supportive of women in 100% of the cases. This is something that is, I'm really ashamed of admitting also, but many women, when they do reach senior positions, they start acting like patriarchs and as gatekeepers, and they would not really open the gates for the flood of women who are waiting to enter those gates. But thank God, I mean, I have willingly and very committedly tried to open as many doors and as many gates for young female economists as possible, but it's not a single person's job. So let's think about how we can start doing it. It will never be done through a public sector initiative. It has to be like from the academia itself. And very interestingly, the monitor the workshops, mentoring workshops for the Commission on the Status of Women are called cement workshops. Cement, ment is for mentoring, but when you read the word cement, it means that they want to cement the position of women in the field of economics. And maybe in the second round, I'll throw some light of the other pathways for women in economics, because not all the women who are doing PhDs in economics will succeed in getting into academia, but that is not the end of their career path. It should not be. So let's explore how they can branch off into other careers, as Ratna also mentioned. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Alia. So Dr. Alia, this point on sponsorship is very, very important, because usually in most of the universities, women are hardly called for to serve on, for instance, on BOS, on academic boards, and by the end of the day, they have lack of experience in these things to go up to a leadership position. So yeah, this is very complicated, and we need to understand that why is that. Most of the time, definitely, as you mentioned, that networks are very, very important in that. Women don't have time to hang out in evening and to spend social evenings and to spend time for, even for some chat outside the mosque, so that they can develop certain type of networks. So these are certain type of things that women are, they have to face disadvantage. So now I will come to Hadia. Hadia is Chairperson, Department of Economics at LUMS. And so Hadia, my question is a little bit different from you. So as we are so far talking about the journey in economics, but as I said that I was analyzing the data of RAPEC database, and my realization was that most of the women, those who are economics, their specialization is usually gender. They are more focused on gender, health, or environment. But I see very few women for instance, in monetary policy, in macroeconomic, or in hardcore economic things. So Sundar had a different point of view on that. But my question is that how you see that difference? Is it the issue of preference or taste? So this is my first question. And also if you throw some light on your recent randomized experiment on the role of AI in women participation in the discipline. So Hadia, over to you.
Dr. Ji, thank you very much. And it's been a real privilege to be a part of this panel and listening to all of this fantastic conversation. So Dr. Asma, as far as your first question is concerned, I think Dr. Ratna has also alluded to this, Dr. Ali has also alluded to this. I think we can't deny the importance of your lived experience when it comes to research questions. So particularly when you are, and I think this is really important for groups that have historically been discriminated. So if your lived experience has to do with, I don't see a lot of women around me working, if I don't have that easy an access to health and education, or even that you see within your household that decision making जो है वो skewed होती है. That is what you're going to take with you into your interests as far as when you go into academia, when you're doing your PhD thesis, when you're coming up with research questions. So I think we can, and like Dr. Alia said, we can't take the person out of when we go into these academic discussions, particularly because at the end of the day, economics is a social science. And it's about decision making, it's about behaviors, it's about thinking through how humans interact with each other, how humans interact with society. The other thing that I also want to highlight, and I think one of the other panelists is going to talk about this as well, the field is so gendered. The history of the field is very male dominated. It remains male dominated. The models that we see, they're biased towards your representative agent is actually a male, white, middle-aged individual when you think about Homo economicus. So perhaps you could also think of it in, and these are all conjectures. It'll be really interesting if Dr. Asma, you actually talk about this in much more when you write your chapter and you're delving into this in a lot more detail. It comes back to this idea that in the mainstream fields, it's just not that easy for women to fit in. You don't have that mentorship. You don't see yourself represented in your basic models. All of that is going to have repercussions. And the fact that you don't have women in monetary policy, that fact that you have women in, you have this skewed gender ratio across fields, I think is a big loss from a public policy perspective. The fact that there are not enough men in gender economics, the fact that there are not enough men in environmental economics, that's a problem. The fact that there's not enough women in monetary policy, in macroeconomic fields, that's a problem. So I think that we're losing out from both. We're losing out some really important perspectives because we don't have enough of the opposite gender in certain fields. And then we can't deny the fact that having greater ratios of women in particular sub-areas of the discipline impacts how research in that discipline is perceived from a general perspective. I mean, you see this in the labor market all the time. Areas or sectors that are female dominated tend to be underpaid, they tend to be undervalued, you tend to see lower high growth trajectories. And it's been the same as far as the discipline of economics is concerned. I don't think it's a coincidence that there are only 3 female Nobel laureates, that 2 of them actually share their economic prize, that it's only now, after so many years, that we're actually seeing such significant pieces of work in labor economics done by Claudia Golden being recognized today. It's because of how we perceive these subfields which are dominated by women within the discipline and how we attach value to these subfields. I'm happy to go into this some more as the discussion continues, but I want to come to your second question about AI and digital technology. I think that as far as digital technology is concerned, the digital revolution is really interesting. It's going to open a lot of interesting areas within economics. One of the areas which we're already working on quite a bit is just the access to technology. And I think ISME, there is a gender element, but there's also a really important class element. So if you just think through numbers in the South Asian context, only about 10% of households have access to the internet. In Pakistan, women are 38% less likely than men to own a mobile phone. They're 49% less likely to have mobile internet. So आप किसी भी किस्म की टेक्नोलॉजी ले लें, चाहे वो चैट जीपीटी हो, चाहे वो even digital platforms हो, women don't have that kind of access to them. As an economist working in this, I find it really problematic because it really restricts the kind of access that women have, because उनके पास तो फोन ही नहीं है, उनके पास इंटरनेट ही नहीं है, तो वो digital platforms को कैसे इस्तेमाल करें? What kind of mobility do they have in the digital space? And that affects their ability to really leverage this technology as far as the labor market is concerned, as far as getting human capital is concerned, as far as even accessing health and education is concerned, because now we have so much happening in the digital space in all of these areas. But I think that it also has important implications of who is going to be able to use this even when you come to higher socioeconomic classes. अगर आपका उस किस्म का comfort ही नहीं है with technology, which we see, women hesitate to use mobile wallets, women hesitate to use internet banking, women hesitate to go out and make use of technology or learn new skills because you just don't have that kind of comfort with a lot of things that are coming out. Then even the use of AI by your higher income groups is not going to be at that. उसमें भी आपको वो फिर divide होता हुआ नजर आएगा. And I think this will have repercussions in fields such as marketing, for example. So these are all really interesting areas which I think are still evolving, and it'll be good to keep track of these and see how things come up in the next 10 years or so. So I'm going to stop here and I can come back to some of these points as we continue our discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Hadia. So building on your first comment on the how we have framed our model and theories. So recently, Sundas wrote a very interesting article on rethinking economics, and we need to change the complete thinking and the model we have in economics. So Sundas, if you explain from that perspective that how those models are basically so much men-centric and why women feel very alien in this field.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Asma. It is an honor to be a part of this panel. And before elaborating a little bit on what you've asked and how women are absent from the models that we teach in our economics departments, and something that Dr. Hadia also alluded to, I'd share a brief anecdote because I'm sharing this stage with Dr. Alia here. There's a triennial event that brings together Nobel laureates of a field with young scholars from all around the world. It's a 2 or 3 day event of panel discussions and meetings. Usually nominations for these events are through a competitive process, and countries send their young fellows to participate in the event. Almost 9 years ago, back in 2014, a committee was interviewing candidates to participate in the meeting of the Nobel laureates in economics. And Dr. Alia was one of the panel members, and I was one of the candidates. My interview went really well, and I think I answered questions about marginal utilities and indifference curves. And at the end, Dr. Alia asked me, I think to gauge whether or not I was familiar with conventions of scientific writing, that Sundas, my name is Alia Khan. So if you were to cite my work, would you write Alia with the year of publication, or would you write Khan with the year of publication? And I said, Khan, of course. And I added that, but that's why we often don't know that it's a woman's work. Women's lack of visibility is not just limited to their physical absence in economics departments and in rooms where policies are designed. And it pervades well, just as, conventions of scientific writing, but that's another debate. It's also in the subject matter that we teach in. And now I answer your question with what you asked earlier. So in the basic models that we teach our students in Econ 101, there's a rational economic agent who divides his time between paid work and leisure. Well, first of all, where did this rational economic agent come from? Did he appear out of thin air? Or there was someone who birthed him, who fed him, who nurtured him, and gave him the necessary human capital to function in these markets? But let's leave that aside for some time. How is he able to divide his time between paid work and leisure when there is a long list of non-leisure activities which are fundamental to human well-being and sometimes even to survival? These include cooking, cleaning, sometimes fetching water, sometimes fetching fuel, preparation of fuel in certain cases, care of children, care of the elderly, care of the infirmed, and household management. Now, excluding this from the model is not a small exclusion. And why do I say this? Why do I say this? Because recently, Yak Charms has analyzed time use data from all around the world. This is global time use data that he has analyzed. And in his analysis, this category of unpaid work, and he uses rather a conservative definition of unpaid work, can take up to almost 8 hours per day in certain contexts. The minimum in his data set that is spent in unpaid work is 3 hours per day. Now, why is this an exclusion of women? Because up until now, 3/4 of that unpaid work is undertaken by women. For Pakistan, again, I'm quoting Jack Charm's statistics, On average, 4 hours and 47 minutes are spent by women in unpaid work. That's compared to 28 minutes by men. So excluding this entire category of work from the models that you teach is excluding women from those models. Now, I'd quote some more data that, moving on to how when expectations are built around women academics, we also exclude this work. This is data from Germany, and I'm sorry I don't have this comparable data from Pakistan, which showed that on average, professors, assistant professors, and associate professors work 51 to 52 hours per week. Obviously, we're expected to teach, we're expected to write papers, attend never-ending staff meetings, admin responsibilities. That means that either you're working more than 8 hours per weekday or you're working overtime. Now, someone who has to undertake 4 hours and 47 minutes of unpaid work every day can possibly not be coming up to these standards. So when the standards were set or are set by what is expected from academics, you're leaving out women and their unpaid responsibilities. Now, inclusion of women in economics, therefore, I think, does not only mean including, people with certain biological characteristics in these rooms. It also means including their point of view, their opinion, and designing structures around the realities of their lives. Stop me if I'm taking too long. The last thing that I want to share over here is that now, when these standards are set, even by those standards, women, and this is widely now documented, women are held to higher standards. They're judged more critically, and I quote some research over here. So this is Card and their colleagues who found that referees are more likely to undervalue women's submissions to journals. Pinkham and Goldsmith, they analyzed NBAR seminars, and they found gender gaps in women's participation. And there's a very interesting research by Dupas and her colleagues who finds that in economics seminars, women are on average asked more questions, and these questions are more likely to be hostile or patronizing. There's even the standards that were set, excluding women, even in those standards, women are judged more harshly. And lastly, I'd quote this recent research, 2020, that there are gender gaps even in citations where women's publications are less likely to be cited by their male peers. You see that they're more likely to be cited in non-economic journals, but they're less likely to be cited by their male peers. I'd end not on a hopeless note, but a few things that we think could help in changing this, and my panelists, of course, have alluded to some of them. One is mentoring, but then there's another paper recently in the Quarterly Journal of Economics that analyzed the nomination of economists to the Econometric Society, and they found that they analyzed data from 1930 up until 2019, and they found that there was a strong negative impact of being a woman up until 2010, but after that it shifted. So what they tried to understand is that how did this shift? And they saw that previously these nominations were done by existing members of the society. And then what happened in 2010 was that there was a committee that was set up with an explicit mandate of choosing people who are likely to be overlooked in the process. And that shifted. So when you have a committee which knows that there are people's work which is likely to be overlooked or undervalued, you can shift that. There's another paper that saw that when conferences are organized by women, you see more women discussants, more women panelists, and we see this today as well. And then mirroring something that I think Dr. Hyder also said, that when women are in decision-making roles, you see that gender parity, and this is across different dimensions, you see the gender parity can reduce. I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sundas. This is very interesting. So I think that when I talk to many of young students, especially at undergrad level, it's very hard to convince them that when we are teaching them Econ 101, for instance, so the utility function is function of, layer and income. So layer is not layer for us. For most of the women, it's not layer. And similarly, even in the macroeconomics, when we estimate the GDP, the price of layer is not included. All the work they are spending, as you said, that the value of time, which is in the household management and raising kids and everything, this is not included in GDP. So I think this is not only for economics, this is for the net benefit of society. So we really need to rethink economics. I completely agree with the idea that the way it is, the basic models are developed, we need to rethink about that. So I think now we can take few questions from the audience. All the economics department, my colleagues from economics department are here. So if there are any questions, so we can take few questions. We still have 15 minutes to go. So.
I think I may have scared them when I said that women are more likely to get questions. They're like, no, we don't want to ask any questions today.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. I am here to talk about, I'm here from Karachi University, Economics Department. I say that in initial level, we see that girls comes more in education, means in economics department in comparison to boys. In my department, I am a student of economics. We are, I think, enroll 80 guys, and we are the 10 boys only among the girls. And it also, in other universities, it also follows Qaid-e-Azam universities if you go search these all things. But why the girls not enter in upper level? Means what are the social barriers which impact them to not go for higher education, and how to solve this problem where we see it? It is a very crucial.
And Dr. Alia, would you like to?
I think what you are stating is a really very obvious fact that the female enrollment in economics programs is quite satisfactory as far as the gender ratio is concerned. Even in higher education institutions, the size of the female student body has increased over time. Like when I did my master's from Qaid-e-Azam University, it was just 5 girls and 25 boys. But now it is almost 40-60, 40% women and 60% men. But the issue is, and now we have to really backtrack a little from career progression to career aspirations. I always used to ask my female econ students as to why they chose economics as a subject when it is very, Qaid-e-Azam University is known for a very quantitative, bias in teaching of economics. So, if they are putting so much of effort in studying economics, what are their career aspirations? And I really got very unsatisfactory and vague answers. So I think the problem is that It is a general issue that there is no career counseling or academic counseling in universities, especially public sector universities that do not really have the funds to allocate for setting up career service, guidance facilities. But it is also the way girls are socialized at the household level to think of a career. Because the career orientation then really gives you the drive and the passion to compete and, sort of battle with all the hurdles that you face in going through that pipeline. So I hope I have answered your question. So we need to build career aspirations for women in economics also.
Yeah. So a few.
Can I ask a question?
And I would request the female participants to please be brave and ask questions. This is a very golden opportunity to give your feedback to this issue, because if we really want to monitor the position of women in economics profession in Pakistan, you have to be a part of it. You can't remain silent spectators and then say that, we didn't get promoted, we didn't get nominated, we are not in senior positions. You have to play your part too.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, no, it's working. So I just completed a survey in Karachi University Economics Department, and what they want to do after completion of their after completing their studies. And most of them said that we will try some college or school to teach. And then our subsequent question was, why not go to banks? And they said, they were like, no, it's very difficult to go for us. So, as Claudia mentioned in her work, that there are stereotype threats that these professions are not for women. So maybe we need to address those as well. So there is a question at the end on the left side. At the back.
Hello, my name is Musira, and the question I have is, women are supposed to usually make selected career choices, as you mentioned, the stereotypes one. So I want to ask where that agency can stem from to choose what they want to pursue, be it a career option, be it what they want to study, where that agency can come from, and who can be the ones to provide it, or is it going to be internalized? I want you to please shed light on it.
Yeah, Sundar, would you like to reply? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much for that question. And I don't know if I can adequately answer it, but I can try. It's a very difficult question because, as Dr. Alia just mentioned, that this socialization, this compartmentalization of men and women into the roles that they function, that begins at a very young age, and it is reinforced at multiple levels. So within households, you see that girls are more likely to help out in household chores. Boys are expected to go to school, perform well, earn a living, and that's reinforced in many ways in the images that we see, in the stories that we read, sometimes in universities. Even professors have been known to say, "Oh, aap logon ne to, kitchen hi sambhalna hai, to aap logon ko kya karna hai?" So it's a difficult, it's very difficult to unlearn, deconstruct, and part of that happens in households, but also in the public sphere. But one thing that we can say makes an impact is the role of mentors. So you see role models, you see people who look like you. So you see women doing things that perhaps you were taught as a young person that you cannot do, that could perhaps make a positive change.
So now I will ask Ratna, I would like to ask one question from you before we close this session, that what do you suggest to include, so what should be the structural change in our institution to include women, especially in policy making?
Are you asking in public institutions or private institutions or
mainly public institutions. Yeah, mainly public institutions.
Okay, so on this issue of mentoring, let me just say what we found at the IMF was, just having allocating mentors. We try to allocate mentors, doesn't quite do it. So the new language is sponsorship, meaning you actually go through the idea of you're not just there to listen and give advice, but you actively support this person. And so that's one point I want to make. The second point I really want to make, it is so true. This whole thing about what I'm hearing in Pakistan is so similar to where I come from. I mean, I come from one of the most backward states in India, from Bihar, which is where we were all grew up. Education was very important for girls and boys, but we were getting educated to get good husbands, and our brothers to get good jobs. That's how it was. But what made a difference was, at least in my own family, was I had no brothers. So that helped, because father was very supportive. In the university, you won't believe it, when I was doing my PhD, I was completely at a loss. And I had a fantastic teaching assistant, a Pakistani, who told me, hey, you're not networked at all. Go and get to know these guys from Italy. Make friends with them. It changed my life, okay? At the IMF, I remember, I'll never forget that when I was leading my first mission, the Prime Minister of this country wrote to management, I won't tell you which country, and said, we don't want her because she's not white and it's a woman. And it's an all-women's team. And my management said, Ratna, if you don't go, it's okay, we can understand. They are completely biased, but if you go, we'll fully support you. I said, I cried. That's one of the few occasions I really went back to my office and cried. I said, they don't even know what I can or cannot do. But anyway, I went. And it was a completely different, after day 2, they forgot I was a man or a woman. We were talking substance. So I want to say 2 things that have been emphasized by all of you. One is mentorship, but in the sense of sponsorship is important. Public sector, academia, anywhere. And the second thing, that Dr. Hyder mentioned, and also Dr. Alia, look, the women have to also, even if with all the biases you've grown up with, you have to step out of your comfort zone. You yourself have to do it, and take the risk, because it pays off. And this experience of mine of leading this mission, 6 months later, I mean, I hate to talk about this, but the Prime Minister told management this was the best mission in 20 years. I mean, who would have thought? Now, maybe he was exaggerating, maybe he was trying to chum up with the top management, but the point is that you are capable, you are educated, go for it, You do have to fight your battles, but you also need support. So, 2 things. Thank you.
Thank you, Ratna. So, my last question from Hadia, how do you see do you think that there is any change in new generation? Are the trends changing and more women are going into economics? So what is your take on that?
So I think, Dr. Asma, you opened with this, right? You said that there are rising trends in other fields, but it's a stagnating trend in economics if you look at what's happening internationally. I think that you asked me a tough question. I think Claudia Golden's Nobel Prize, what Sundas has been talking about in terms of the trends in 2010 and how things have been changing, there is, I feel at least, a shift that has been coming. I think in this, although COVID pushed us back, like Dr. Ratna said in the beginning, that its gaps are now going to take longer to close. But one thing I feel COVID did was it really highlighted the reproductive burden. In this, Claudia Golden's Nobel, where she explicitly talks about the motherhood penalty, has been, I feel, really crucial. Because more and more the language is shifting from just thinking about women's, so we put a lot of pressure on women to be in the productive sphere, to be in productive work. I mean, when that student asked that question about agency, the mainstream economist in me was thinking that, if you are working, if you have access to monetary assets, then automatically that shift is going to come and you're going to be seeing more say in household decision making. But I think that increasingly the understanding that asking women to be part of the productive sphere while not giving them the space to reduce their reproductive burden, that understanding is coming through. There's a lot of push coming on that front. And that is really what is needed if you want women to be a part of not just economics, but all kinds of productive work, all kinds of fields that are currently male dominated. Until we don't reduce women's reproductive burden, and until we don't start valuing reproductive work and start saying that they're making important contributions and let's support them while they're doing the productive work as well, it's going to be really difficult for women to be making that jump into academia, for example, or any field, because the reality is that the most crucial years as far as your career is concerned is also the prime reproductive years. So we need that support, we need that mentorship that our panelists have talked about. And I think that as that comes through, you're going to see that upward trend. I mean, I'm a hopeless optimistic in this. I think that capable women like the panelists that we're seeing today is what is needed. And I think these are important role models, not just for the women in the audience, but they're important role models for all the men in the audience as well. Because when you see more women coming out, you see more women in the public sphere, it shifts your perceptions, it shifts norms, it shifts gender orders. And I think it's really important for us to realize that women are not alone in this. We do have male allies and we need to really support each other as we go through it.
Okay, thank you, Hadia. So Dr. Alia, any last minute thought you want to say?
Yes, I'm just going to end on a note which is very important also for the women sitting in the audience over here, that when we talk of mentoring and role models, it's not necessary to only look out for female mentoring and female role models. I mean, the Honorable Governor of the State Bank has joined us, and he and I were together on the Monetary Policy Committee in the State Bank, and I was the only woman, but I got a lot of guidance and support for my views and ideas from the men in the boardroom when we were discussing monetary policy and macroeconomic developments of Pakistan. So as Dr. Ratna said, that please, we have to step out of our comfort zones and stop thinking that it is only some motherly figure who's going to come and hold our hand and, take us through the very, very clogged pipeline of women in the field of economics. We can also look towards men as allies and as supporters of women in the field of economics, especially in the male-dominated fields, macro, monetary, fiscal, trade, etc. So I'll end on that positive note. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alia. Sundar, do you have any last-minute thoughts?
If I may just add that we've talked a lot about reproductive labor and women's work burdens, and I just wanted to share that it's not that it's something that we cannot do anything about, because at least from two historical analyses suggest that there's infrastructure that can be made available to households that significantly reduces this burden. And that is as simple as access to piped water and electricity. You see both in the US and the UK data that women's participation in the formal labor force spikes after households had started receiving this access. So that's one thing, that when designing infrastructure, considering women's unpaid work and their domestic labor could be a step in reducing their unpaid work as well as liberating them. Greenwood calls this engines of liberation. The second is Claudia Golden's work, which shows that access to contraception obviously reduces women's work burden, allows them to choose how to space birth so that they're able to focus on their careers as well as their families. And the third is access to domestic technologies. So washing machines, dishwashers, vacuum cleaners, these technologies, when made cheaper, can also reduce women's domestic work burdens.
Thank you all the panelists. And as a moderator, my responsibility is not to conclude, rather make sure that to keep the debate going. So I hope that many of the young economists here and even the senior economists, those who are well established in the field, they will rethink about economics and to make it more rational. So with this note, I conclude the session. Thank you all the panelists for taking time and for being here and for your participation in this very important topic. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.